This week, Allan's out of town at yet another developer summit, but we have a great episode coming up with Brian Callahan where we're going to discuss BSD and education. Also, we got a lot of news and a lot more user feedback to get to, so sit back and relax. More BSD is coming your way right now. BSD Now, episode 114, BSD-Schooling, recorded for November 4th, 2015. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Allan Jude.
Glad to have you guys with us this week. We're actually recording this a little bit early because, yet again, Allan just has some place to go. And this time, we got a developer summit. So we expect good stories from that. And where is this one being held at, by the way?
This is at NetApp in Sunnyvale, California.
Were you out in California last week for OpenZFS too?
In San Francisco, not Sunnyvale, but they're like half an hour apart or something like that.
Why don't they just give you like a citizenship or something? You can get an apartment.
I don't want to live in the U.S.
You don't want to live in the U.S. Fine. Well, you're here often.
See, if they could have had the two events a little closer together, I wouldn't have minded at all. But
that's right. Well, either way, it's probably a flight compared to going to Europe or Tokyo. So
it's actually only an hour shorter than going to the UK.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's
it's
true. We're
5 hours instead of like 6.
North.
Yeah. Luckily, it's a direct flight this time. Not like when I went to meet BSD, I had to stop in Denver.
Oh, yuck.
It was more that it was two smaller planes that way. This way is one bigger plane.
Okay.
Bigger planes are better.
Well, good. Well, hopefully it'll be a great dev summit. Is it a FreeBSD specific dev summit?
Yeah, it's vendor and dev summit. So lots of companies that use FreeBSD will be coming out to talk about things they've come up with that we might want, things that they would like us to do, and things that, they really need us to do, and so on. So it should be lots of good interaction with some of the not necessarily committers, but people that consume FreeBSD and build things on FreeBSD. And hopefully we can, spur people on to get certain things done in time for the 11 freeze, which is coming up in like 5 months or 6 months or something like that.
Well, we will look forward to next week's episode, hearing how that went. So I know that's nice. We're recording this a lot earlier, so I got to wait longer than you do. Yes. But it'll all be good. I'll enjoy hearing it. Probably see some stuff on Twitter before then, too, because you guys are pretty good about posting stuff. So let's get right into the headlines for this week. We've got a lot of news, even though it's a week when Allan's out of town. There's a lot of stuff to get to. Full episode here. So first up, we have the WhatsApp founder had an interview over at Wired.com, which talked about how basically WhatsApp got so huge, and of course FreeBSD gets a nice mention there. So go ahead and tell us about that.
Yeah, so this interview is with Brian Acton, who's the co-founder along with John Coombe, who we talked to before. Anyway, so WhatsApp has about 900 million users, and they manage this with a team of only 50 engineers.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
And whereas Twitter has, I think, 4,000 employees in order to manage their 300 million users. One's using BSD, one's using Linux. I don't know.
It could be. Might have something to do with it.
Yeah, but they had some great pull quotes about FreeBSD, including, one of the reasons they started with BSD was because FreeBSD happened because both Jan and I have experience with FreeBSD because they both used to work at Yahoo. And that's where they got into FreeBSD. But they said FreeBSD has a nicely tuned network stack and extremely good reliability. We find managing FreeBSD installations to be quite straightforward compared to Linux. And they also said that, Linux is a beast of complexity. FreeBSD has the advantage of being a single distribution with, extraordinarily good ports collection instead of, being like, well, which distro of Linux do we use and how do we make this app? This app likes to ship with packages for this distro, but this app wants this distro, and this one assumes this file is going to be over here, and this one assumes that same file is going to be over there. You can definitely see where BSD consistent layout is advantageous for that. And they say, to us, it has advantages as we have very few problems that have occurred at the OS level. When you're building an application, you don't want the OS to get in the way. You just want to build your application and deal with your own problems. They say with Linux, you tend to have to wrangle more, and you want to avoid that as much as you can. And
That's
I
right.
think FreeBSD also provides the inspectability that you would look for, being able to tell what's happening with, things like gstat and all the dtrace and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the interview also got picked up by Business Insider, so I have an extra link there where they kind of analyze some of it. But it was a good piece on just, a startup that uses FreeBSD and why. And, I think a bunch of startups would have been like, oh, yeah, we should have done that.
Yeah, I wish we knew about that back in the day, right? Okay, well, next up we have an article, or actually a blog post this week from Randy Westland, who's talking about his experiences as a sysadmin, of course, both on Linux and BSD. In particular, though, he's contrasting init systems. And I filed this under systemd, right? Because this is what a lot of people are talking about. But one of the things he mentions is that, he finds that in a while it does make some things easier running systemd, such as writing service files and having it run once everywhere. He said the trade-off they're finding is it comes in the complexity and lack of transparency of what's actually happening under the hood. But another area of concern said they were seeing on servers is the reproducibility of boots. And in his examples on servers, there's often times where services start up in different orders, maybe to save a few moments on boot time or something's taking a little longer to init, and that is introducing some complexity. But his take on the simplicity of BSD startup scripts is they're super easy to hack on and monitor and haven't introduced necessarily the feature creep that we have seen in systemd. But I'll be curious to see, though, if him and others start trying out launchd and how that compares. Does it bring in some of the problems that systemd has introduced, or does it solve some of these things more evidently?
Well, because I think with launchd, as the way Jordan described it last week, it would be rather than service might start in a different order. It's more that whatever the service depends on, it won't matter if the other thing is started yet, because it'll get started as a dependency.
As needed.
Yeah.
And on-demand service.
Yeah.
Loading.
And yeah. But
So I'll be curious to see some blog posts about that. If people have maybe compared, FreeBSD's traditional init system, launchd, and systemd, and contrast those things. I'd love to hear the strengths and weaknesses of each.
Yeah, and the BSD Now also got a shout out. We're talking about our interview with Ryan Lordy of the GNOME project, and talking about GNOME paying attention to BSD compatibility and having the automated builds against FreeBSD to make sure that GNOME keeps working, and doing what they can to keep compatible with BSD.
Okay. So next up here, we have an article over at opensource.com in their business section, an interview with Jim Salter talking about at the recent All Things Open conference where they interviewed him. He's talking about learning to embrace open source or getting buried.
Yes. So he talks about how he first got into FreeBSD, and then goes into when he started FreeBSDWiki.net and how that went, and then talking about, why enterprises need to use open source and, what some of the issues are there. And then how at his consulting practice, he uses open source to solve problems for his clients. And overall, it's just a really interesting interview. And then at the end, he also links to his talk at All Things Open called Move Over Rsync, and talking about replacing it with file system replication like ZFS. I think the biggest problem with doing your backups with something like rsync is that how do you get every single file from exactly the same moment in time?
Sure.
It's like, well, you could rsync a ZFS snapshot, or you could just use ZFS replication, and then the incrementals are going to be so much faster. The biggest thing is with rsync, in order to find the changes in a file, it has to read the whole file on both sides, and then sure, it only transfers the differences across the network and some hashes or whatever, but if you're using ZFS, then it doesn't have to read the whole file. It just says, each block, find me every block that's changed since this date. Okay, ship them, and backs out the network. It's just, if you have a data set of 15 million files, rsync could take days, whereas ZFS would just take seconds. I know that this was actually a problem that came up in the FreeBSD cluster when they were moving the NFS share that has all the home directories from California to New York, that the rsync run was taking so long that it's like, well, we've rsynced and then we've rsynced again and again, but it's still taking 20 hours to do. And we don't want to lock everybody out of the server for 20 hours while we do the final sync. It's like, how can we make this faster? And
well, it turns out ZFS
yes,
does
well,
that.
I think their NFS shares were living off a NetApp or something that wasn't going to do that.
Oh, bummer.
But anyway, that was a cool article.
Okay. Well, speaking of cool
No,
articles, next
not
up we
cool
have
articles.
an uncool article, but interesting nonetheless. Okay. We have HP's CTO urging businesses to avoid permissive licenses.
Yes.
Very
So,
interesting. Looks like Martin Fink did
yes,
this one.
Martin Fink was being a Fink and telling everybody to use the GPL.
Ooh,
Yes. So he went on a bit of a rant about the negative effects of license proliferation. And on that particular point, I agree. You know, if you look back a number of years, there's like 80 new open source licenses, and a lot of them are not that different, and some of them are pretty horrible. And, you know, you have like Oracle coming up with what they call theirs, the
Who knows?
the UPL, the Universal Permissive License. But he's like, Oracle doesn't actually use it for anything. And then
No, that was just a thing.
A bunch of stuff like that. And so, yes, I'm against license proliferation. We don't need all these new licenses necessarily. But then he, goes a little crazy and starts talking about that permissive licenses are the problem. He says ended his session with an extended appeal to move the open source software industry away from permissive licenses like the Apache 2.0 and the BSD license and ISC and so on, towards copyleft licenses like the GPL. Although some of his evidence seemed a little flaky. It was like, the Apache 2.0 license is currently the most widely used permissive license. But the thing that developers overlook when adopting it, he said, is that by using Apache, they're also making a choice about how much work they want to put into building any sort of community around the project. If you look at Apache licensed projects, he noted, you'll find that they are very top-heavy with governance structures, technical committees, working groups, and various boards, he said, are needed to make such projects function. But if you look at copyleft projects, he added, you find that these structures simply are not needed. I think the problem there is the type, he's looking at Apache projects like OpenSwitch or OpenStack, which are huge and have a lot of people. And if you have a lot, then yes, sure, you should have governance structures. If it's a little project with 3 developers, then you don't need a board and so on.
Yeah, you need an IRC channel.
Yes, but, I think there's 2 things there. Is first of all, some of those projects that are using the Apache license are because they're like Apache incubator projects or are actually run by the Apache Foundation. And so, yes, they have all this structure because, as Kirk McKusick says, the way you measure the strength of an open source project is how many change of leadership it could withstand, right? And if you don't have any structure or any leadership, then maybe you can and maybe you can't. But using the Apache license doesn't mean that you require a technical committee and working groups and a board and stuff. It's just if you have
kind of a straw man.
If you have a very large project, you're going to need these things. But that doesn't really have much to do with the license. There are plenty of smaller permissively licensed projects that don't have any of that sort of infrastructure. Then he goes on to state that OpenSwitch, which is the new network-defined storage or software-defined storage setup, the OpenSwitch code is released under the Apache 2.0 license because the other partner companies that worked on it viewed that as a requirement. And I think it's good news that more and more companies are requiring a permissive license instead of working with the GPL. But this is HP wanted to get networking.
Then he whines a little.
HP wanted to get networking companies and hardware suppliers on board in order to get all the legal departments at all of their partners to sign on to the project. He said HP was forced to go with a permissive license. And it's like, well, yes, the whole point of a permissive license is that you avoid the legal problems.
Yeah, I'm no fan of lawyers here, but in this case, they're probably giving you some really good advice.
It's like
save yourself the headache later.
the number of people that have gotten in trouble with the GPL. But the worst part is
how many people have been sued over a BSD license?
The worst part about the GPL is not so much that, some of the people that are getting in trouble for the GPL are violating it, and that's, most of the time they were doing it on purpose and it's their fault. But the bigger thing is, how can you always be absolutely sure you're complying with the GPL? Because it's very long and it has tendrils all over the place. Whereas the BSD license is like, did we delete any of the copyright notices? No? Okay, we're good.
Right? Yeah, done.
So hopefully the trend towards permissive licenses will continue. It was nice to see Intel dual licensing their drivers for the network cards and the graphics cards and so on under a GPL/BSD license so that it can still be used and developed by BSD projects. Whereas, otherwise stuff gets developed under BSD and then somebody can take it and GPL it, but it doesn't go the other way.
Sure.
And then secondly, there was another quote off the LWN website here from Richard Stallman saying, "I'm not saying that competitors to a GNU package are unjust or bad. That isn't necessarily so. The pertinent point is that they are competitors. The goal of the GNU project is for GNU to win the competition. Each GNU package is part of the GNU system and should contribute to the success of the GNU project. Thus, each GNU package should encourage people to run other GNU packages rather than their competitors, even competitors which are free software." So it's like, that sounds like, Oracle wants you to use Oracle this and Oracle that and not mix any not Oracle in with your Oracle.
Hey, Richard, are we going to put some DRM on it to enforce that?
Yeah, it's like literally, it's like, are GNU packages going to purposely try to be incompatible with non-GNU things? It's like, GNU, what's something, I don't know. Some random GNU utility will stop compiling with Clang and only work with GCC.
Yeah, what is it? Samba or something? Like,
yeah.
Done.
But yeah, I never thought I'd hear Richard Stallman espousing for vendor lock-in.
That's, interesting, huh? Makes you think.
Yeah. I don't know. But anyway.
Hey, well, the only vendor you really want to be locked into, speaking of vendors today, is going to be our first sponsor this week, which is going to be IX Systems. So ixsystems.com/BSD Now. And for a bonus this week, ixsystems.com/Mission Complete, where Allan, hopefully you get that up on the screen. You can show people that. But tell us a little bit about what's going on with the Mission Complete program.
Yes. So IX Systems is looking to collect a bunch of stories from people who have accomplished some mission using IX Systems hardware, FreeNAS, FreeBSD, PCBSD, open source stuff that is related to this show, basically. So if you've used BSD anything to accomplish a goal or a mission, then they want to hear your story. So if you go to ixsystems.com/mission complete and write up your story, and then you can also indicate whether you'd be willing to do an interview about the story if you win, and put in your email address, and they will publish your stories online and in print, maybe in the FreeBSD Journal and other places.
You'll probably get mentioned here.
And the winning entries are selected based on creativity, technical merit, and sincerity. And if you're the selected one for the month, then you will win a prize.
Great. Yeah, that's really cool. Well, again, go ahead and send your stories in. We'd love to see them. I'll be curious to see which ones rise to the top here. But definitely get in touch with those guys over at IX Systems so you can have one of those stories as well. Whether, again, it's just getting a small FreeNAS Mini to throw under your desk, or you need some powerhouse hunkin' server. They can do that and everything in between. So again, contact those guys at ixsystems.com/BSD Now. Talk to their sales engineers. Tell them what you're trying to do. They'll help design the perfect solution for whatever problem it is you're trying to solve.
We're joined this week by Brian Callahan, who's a PhD student at Rensselaer Polytechnic in New York and a friend of the show and has done a bit of teaching with BSD, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So first of all, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, this is what, third time?
No, second time. Oh, God, third time. Not yet. Well, they have a big party when it's the third time.
So to get right into our talk about education, how did you first get interested in teaching using the BSDs?
So I didn't really have a choice.
That helps.
So I'm still involved in NICEBug, the New York City BSD user group, as you know. And I guess when I had first gotten my OpenBSD account, the day after was a meeting that I went to. And I had mentioned to George that I got my account. And his response was, great, you're doing the April meeting because we don't have anyone filled in for April yet. So it was just a matter of, okay, now I need to figure out how to talk about this thing I'm now doing for an hour and make it useful and relevant and interesting to people, all of whom know way more about this than I do, I think. Probably still is true. So I've just continued on doing it because that's one of the core missions of NICEBug is to do education, is to figure out different ways to bridge users to developers to sysadmin, to everyone who does and uses BSD.
So what do you think are some of the biggest impediments to getting more BSD courses into colleges and even high schools and so on?
So it's a weird catch-22 that one of which we already know, and that is we need more BSD people to do more BSD things. Because if you think about the courses that are taught now, for the most part, Will Bachman does one. I've done some guest lecturing. Robert Watson, GNN. I mean, these are all people who already are BSD people who are then going into spaces of education to do teaching based on BSDs. The other downside in the modern world is money. So one thing that Red Hat does a lot of is they actually give money to universities and say, teach an open source class. And although I don't think they go out of their way to really pay attention to what is actually taught in these courses, there's probably some sort of inner feeling from the professors like, oh, we're getting all this money from Red Hat. What does Red Hat do? They do Linux, they do open source support. So that's probably what they want us to teach. So let's figure out how to teach that into these open source courses that they're paying for. So I guess on the one hand, we just need more BSD people who are willing to go into spaces and places of education and just teach what they know, and really take ownership of their expertise, both of BSD and of teaching. On the other hand, it's just getting our big corporate sponsors or the foundation or somebody or something to really give money to these places so that they know that BSD is a thing that we want to be taught. And so I don't know if that means someone like Netflix just gives money to a university, or perhaps they earmark money to the foundation and say, put this aside for education. That could be another way of going about it. The other way to go about it is we really need to think hard about who our allies are, and that we will get support from places that we don't necessarily know exist yet. And we don't really know who is going to be our allies until we try it. So Dan Mongil recently taught a course at, I'm going to forget the name
Uppsala
of it.
University?
Wrong, and I apologize. No, it's the Women Power.
Yeah, it's a Women Courage conference, but it was at Uppsala University.
That was at Uppsala? Yeah. Okay. So even just direct advertising to women, direct advertising to African Americans, direct advertising to whichever, and really all, because it should be all minorities and those who are marginalized in tech, because they're going to be the culture change and the human change and just the human power that we're going to need to snowball this thing. So we really need to kind of put our branches and our tentacles everywhere we can and figure out who's going to walk with us as we figure out this journey.
Yeah. At the OpenZFS developer conference I was at last week or 2 weeks ago, Nexenta was putting money into, I think, 3 or 4 different universities to create a bunch of positions where students would learn about developing file systems specifically, because they want there to be this whole new crew of engineers coming out of school with expertise on building file systems and advancing ZFS and the technology that their company depends on. And I think maybe
right, exactly.
It's just expressing it that way to a bunch of the companies that use BSD, that, if we really want to advance the network stack, we need more than, 3 university students that are working on developing new technologies for the networking stack.
Right. And I think that goes further, because it means that until that happens, we'll have a whole bunch of professors that don't see the real world value of having BSD knowledge. So they'll kind of just default back to Linux or Windows or what have you. And getting the money involved is one way of saying, hey, no, this is actually useful, important, real world, immediately applicable skills in BSD that your students, your graduates are going to get jobs in while they're still at the university, let alone beyond. But another interesting avenue that I have found is with the student clubs. So here at RPI, RPI for some interesting reason is known as a place to do computer security, despite the fact that we have no professors who are currently doing and researching internet security. It's because we had a bunch of students who really know their stuff decide to all get together and start a computer security club, RPISec. And they've really managed to put RPI's name on the map for doing computer security. So even if we can't get in through more formal avenues, sometimes the students are just as good.
Or even better in certain cases.
Right, or even better.
Yeah. Well, like when I was a student going through a college in Canada for network engineering and so on, the two main professors that taught BSD related stuff weren't really developers. They were just regular users. So, had worked in industry as sysadmins or whatever, and were just familiar with BSD and taught the courses on it. Sadly, now that one of those professors, who's now my business partner, and I left, there's no one left that teaches it. And so they've switched the last of the courses from BSD back to Red Hat.
Right, and a similar story happens at RPI. In the 90s, RPI and really a lot of upstate New York is like this big BSD shop. Actually, at one time, RPI was, I believe it's the single largest consumer of the line printer daemon in the world was here. So FreeBSD kind of just had this appearance and this knowledge and this existence up here. And as those people left or got jobs or what have you, those who took their place didn't have that same expertise. And then what do? You just default back to what you think everybody else knows, which, whether or not we like it, tends to be Linux.
One of the other things that would happen with those courses is that, as they age, the content needs to be refreshed, and suddenly, the professor hasn't been keeping up, or there's a new person replacing them, and they just don't have the expertise. And so when they refresh it, they change the content. But in general, I would say that with the BSDs, they have this higher level of stability, but I don't mean like doesn't crash. I mean like when you learn how to do something, the way you do that doesn't change it from underneath you, like in other operating systems. And so that seems like it would lend itself to teaching it because it has a longer shelf life for the courses and so on. Do you find that to be true?
I would say yes and no. So yes, in the fact that it will not be pulling the rug out from under your feet. And I think now FreeBSD is doing what, the 5-year, or that's the goal of the 5-year support for the new releases. So that's even nicer because it means that you, in case you don't get updated, you can still teach relevant and up-to-date stuff for 5 years. But the other really interesting thing is the no of that is that the BSDs now are finally at a place where really interesting wild forks can happen and really do great experimentation. So you think of like Sherry BSD, which Robert Watson is researching out in Cambridge. Even thinking like hardened BSD, it would bring in ASLR, other security stuff, Edge BSD.
Next BSD, which we talked about last week.
Next BSD as well. So these are all, I think, really interesting places of experimentation that we shouldn't be afraid to introduce students to. So it almost like they have the choice of whatever they want. They can go do these radical experimentations on one hand, if that's the thing they're into, or if they're really looking for the stability, and as we teach them more grounded fundamentals of IT, of open source, of operating systems, we have all of our stable FreeBSD open net to fall back on and to use as really a grounding point.
Yeah, and I think
so. It works actually both ways for us.
Because I can see it really depends what you're trying to teach, right? I because of what I've always done and the way I taught, I was teaching sysadmins, so it was about you want to teach to the stable thing that you're going to use. But if you're doing research or learning about operating system design, then yes, one of these new exciting forks, there's lots of half finished work that you can work on and other there's a lot more interesting things happening.
And I think that's to our benefit, really, because it means that you can take BSD, the broad overarching thing, and really develop it into a long-lasting, multi-year curriculum that brings up new computer scientists, brings up new engineers in the foundational aspects of the BSDs. And then depending on where they choose to go, whether they go towards a more sysadmin route, towards a more traditional programming route, or towards academic experimentation, academic research, they're still just a BSD, a thing that they know and are already familiar with, waiting for them wherever they go.
Yep. So when you're trying to promote BSD in education, what are some of the main points that you like to emphasize when talking with people about it?
So I never have had to directly have that talk. So I've always been educator by accident or just by knowing the right people who happen to be teaching the right courses. So I would actually say the best thing to do is if you're a student, a graduate student like myself, even an undergraduate who has a particular expertise in some topic, go hang out with students, go hang out with professors who teach these classes and see if there's a way to talk BSD into what they're teaching, whether it's a guest lecture, a guest lab, homework assignments, whatever it might be. So the interesting thing for me is I actually work with a computer science faculty member in some NSF research that I do that's more humanities based. And he happens to be teaching one of these open source courses, and he'd never taught one before. So in his mind, it was, well, Brian knows a lot about this open source thing, so maybe I can ask him to do a guest lab or a guest lecture. And that's happened more than once now, and it's a ton of fun, so I never mind doing it. But that's an easy way that you don't even have to really be all about, I want to sell BSD in education. It's just this nice, natural entry point into teaching. But if we want to do the intentional, I want to sell BSD in education route, I think it really does fall back to figuring out the more non-traditional avenues in the way in, whether that's the advertising, specifically classes for women, other minorities, other marginalized in IT. Because I have a feeling that it will work out in the undergraduate context. There are likely enough of us, or there are likely enough people who will gain enough BSD knowledge to teach it at the undergraduate level. And we're never going to be bereft, of IT undergraduates. Like, there's never going to be a year where computer science falls to like 8 people in the world who want to do this.
Right.
So we'll always find new students in the traditional sense. I think it's really a matter of finding students in the non-traditional sense, because they're much more likely to then also be a lot more passionate about open source and really about BSD. I think that like if we open the door to them, if we're the ones who, through our community, really make this an open and welcoming space for people who don't or have difficulty getting into IT, getting into open source. If we're kind of like that group that they can come to and we can be open, and that of course will take some community changing, then we have this great new cohort and generation of really passionate BSD users and developers. And I think that would be pretty awesome.
So you mentioned it earlier, but you recently ran a guest lab for that open source class. Could you tell us a little bit about that and how it went?
Yeah, so the professor said, you know a lot about this BSD thing, and I'm teaching an open source class. So do you want to do a class or a lab on it? And I said, of course, because I enjoy teaching and I enjoy BSD, and it's an easy way to do the two together. So what it was a documentation lab. So the goal of it was the students had to read through. I had a choice of either FreeBSD's documentation, which I left pretty open. It was any of the handbooks, anything on the web pages, or the manual pages were fair game, or OpenBSD, and it was pretty open as well there. Anything in the FAQ, the other websites, or the man pages were all fair game. And their goal wasn't to necessarily read any of these things for content knowledge. It was to just look through everything, find a typo, find a grammar mistake, something small that teaches them then how to check out a BSD and do that successfully. So really for FreeBSD, it's learning some basic subversion. For OpenBSD, it's learning basic CVS, editing it, and then making a patch out of it, so SVN diff or CVS diff, and then learning the proper mechanisms to get that patch into the OS of their choosing. So it kind of does a lot of things. It does intro to the non-Git, as you will, version control, intro into just reading through documentation, which is an important skill in and of itself. if you have a problem, you kind of need to know where to go to get your answer. And then also an introduction to what it means to be part of one of these BSD communities. It's really nice on FreeBSD because you guys have the Bugzilla that's easy and free, and the kids intuitively know how to use it. And thank you also because you're the one who spent a lot of time going through all those diffs and reviewing them and committing them.
Myself
and I think it's really important.
Benedict did that, yes.
Right, you and Benedict. And I think it's you guys. Yeah, I know you in Sweden. I was going to chide you for being a slacker, but you actually weren't, which is good. But I think your responses were actually really important because your responses, for the most part, weren't just thanks for the patch, goodbye. You in particular wrote to somebody that you hope they send more stuff and that you were encouraging them to continue on the path. And I think that's really, really important. I think that's important to show how open the BSD community can be if that's a political and cultural battle we want to fight. And I think I want to fight it, and I think we should fight it. But it's also just nice every once in a while to be recognized for your work, even if it's just from class.
Yep. Well, and the other thing I tried to make sure to put in some of those is like, and you'll notice your change will be live on our website within the next hour. Because, coming back to that and actually seeing, oh, hey, look, the change I made is actually live on the website now. I made a difference. I think that helped. Encourage.
Yeah, and then they get to see their name in the commit log, which is always nice.
Yeah, and just...
That was actually the final part of their grade was they had to go through and actually find your commit.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that kind of propelled me forward to do the next patch after the first one was that, I did this and it actually happened and things changed and that was, the difference. Yep. So the next one we had, so the BSDs started out as academic research and, they had a long history of being used for research, TCP/IP and all this stuff. And while they're still used for time to time, like the multipath TCP stuff is happening at Swinburne University and a couple other ones like that. But what do you think we can do to increase the amount of actual research that gets done on the BSDs?
Get more people who want to go to graduate school to work on BSD stuff. Unfortunately, that's, it's the short answer and the long answer and the easy answer and the hard answer.
Yeah, well,
it's that catch-22 all over again.
It's the catch-22. It's like, well, which school has a BSD program? And it's like, well, which school has BSD students to support a BSD program?
Right. I think that might be a little bit easier. We can kind of break that spiral if we get one of those two things. So if we have a lot of students who want to work on BSD, they could put pressure on the department to at least get someone who's willing to let them do that kind of research, if not actually be someone who can guide them more formally and provide a little more oversight to their work. On the other hand, if we have a professor who walks into a program and says, I want to do research on BSD, that kind of ropes a whole lot of graduate students in whether or not they necessarily want to do BSD when they get there, which is interesting enough, just the way graduate school and money tends to work out. But I think even that can be positive. I mean, I don't think we should ever snub somebody through their wanting to or their having to or their being paid to come to the BSDs and do work.
Yeah, we'll take anybody's work.
Pretty much.
And I think that kind of more students would probably want to do work on BSD if they even knew that it was a thing. Or understood the differences.
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah.
I'm sure that. So like here, I want to say 2 years ago, because I think it was a year before I got here, they actually had a hackathon for the Linux kernel. So why don't we have a hackathon for the FreeBSD kernel or a hackathon for some other, BSD or some other things? I mean, you can do with documentation. Clearly, I had 30 something students for 2 hours just work on BSD documentation. So it can be done. It's just a matter of kind of bringing them to the point where they realize that that's a thing that they can do. And they tend to be pretty excited on most anything that they're doing in tech.
Yeah. Now I'm thinking we need to have a hackathon of like technical writing courses just to work on
Yeah,
documentation.
that'd be.
Like even
And that was kind of my point of doing that doc lab was to really reinforce the point that documentation is kind of this unsung but vitally necessary component, not just to the BSDs, but to any open source project that actually kind of wants to have users and kind of wants to have a future after the last commit.
Yep. Well, and part of it was like when we were at that Women Courage event at Uppsala University in Sweden, when we were at the job fair part, I was surprised because I haven't done that many events outside of the core BSD stuff. The number of students that didn't really know or understand what open source was, let alone how it would apply to their career and what they were trying to do. And I can definitely see that in people taking more English, writing, humanities type courses that they probably don't really know that much about what open source is or care. But if you're learning technical writing, this is a spot where there's huge amount of work that we can do, and you can make a career for yourself just out of being known as the person that wrote this or that document, right?
Right. No, it's funny you bring that up now, because actually at the lab, when I was teaching it, there were a few students who kind of realized in the process that this was something they could put on their resumes. So I actually had to field a bunch of questions of, can I put FreeBSD or OpenBSD, whichever one I choose to work on my resume? They were like, will employers recognize it? I'm like, well, they'd recognize it, but they might ask you what you did, and you'll probably have to say a little bit more than just, oh, I send a documentation pageant once for a class.
I corrected a typo.
But I think it's good that they have that in mind, because that could be another way, and I think it's kind of an important way to get them more interested in doing the BSDs. I know tons of people who ended up getting tech jobs through open source projects that they worked on. That those who were hiring them knew the projects, respected the projects, and said, no, we actually want to hire people who work on these projects because we love them.
Yeah, and that was the point of the panel we did at the Women's University there was, why open source can help your career path. And we kind of talked about a couple different people, right? Benedict, who had done it all in academia the whole time, or Drew, who had graduated as an engineer and then was like, now what? And started playing with FreeBSD and started working on the docs. And then now, she's basically a professional writer now. And then, Dan was kind of freelancing, and then I did the business side of it. Is I've actually never had a regular job. I've always just kind of worked for myself as a open source consultant type person, and it was strange when I was teaching. Students would ask me about how do you questions about being interviewed for a job, and I'm like, I don't know. I've never been interviewed for a job.
I've always just said, hey, self, you want to get money?
Yeah.
Sure, myself. Let's do it.
Get to work. Yeah. But yeah, I think there's more we can do to promote, there's the idea that you build a name for yourself by being the guy that wrote the ZFS handbook, or the guy that,
or the girl.
Yes, the person. Yes, sorry. Yes, the person that wrote this, when I took the Unix security class that I took in college, our textbook was Drew's BSD Hacks, which isn't even really a textbook. It's just a book full of interesting things you can do with BSD. And we applied a bunch of those and then kind of went from there after we found that is very good material for getting people started, because it's short, like 1 and 2 page little things you can do that are interesting and cool. And once you see, oh, yeah, I want to learn this cool trick and this cool trick. And then we built on top of that to learn, this is how you set up a caching proxy that blocks Facebook at work and things like that.
Right. Yeah. No, that's actually a really good idea. I hadn't thought of that. I have Drew's book somewhere.
Yeah.
I should pull that out.
Actually, I gave my copy from school away to someone at a conference so they could get Drew to autograph it for them. Anyway, so the other question we have is, with Windows and Mac and Linux kind of getting the majority of the public attention now, what can we do to help promote BSDs as a platform for teaching computers, and maybe sooner, before the post-secondary level, so that people will have at least heard of things other than Linux by the time they get to college?
Right. So there is a lot of work by academics about doing tech stuff for younger children, both in a more traditional sense, and then also a lot more in a social justice sense. And I kind of work in that social justice arena, kind of really figuring out how to get students who are underrepresented in tech, and even just underrepresented, period, interested in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so I think one interesting way to do that is to take those of us who have done teaching, myself, yourself, GNN, Robert Watson, Dan Longe, anyone who's done the teaching work, and kind of pump out a few academic articles on what we're doing. And it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but what it does is it signals to the people who are doing that work, who are specifically interested in targeting children of all varieties, that we're here, that we have curriculum for them, and that we are willing to partner with them. And I know one of them, maybe it's GNN, I forget. One of them is actually doing work to the pre-secondary education students.
Justin Gibbs of the FreeBSD Foundation.
That's
is
it.
teaching a course.
That's it, Justin. Yeah, so we should get Justin involved, front and center, because he's actually doing that work directly. And maybe it's not necessarily we're going to put BSD front and center with these kids.
Well, no, like I think with his,
but it might be we keep BSD as like the tool around which these kids build their tools, whether it's Lego Mindstorms or there's so many. You take your pick, really. One of the things that I've always done is make sure that the tools that we make here at RPI, as part of my funded research, actually works on the BSDs, and it actually does, which is nice. And I think it's those little things, just to keep that word, that idea, the fact that that's a thing that they can do as they move on to their secondary education, as a way of saying, okay, I'm here now, and all growing up, I've been using this thing called BSD. I want to do it. I want to learn something about it. Can you teach me something about it? And I think if we get enough of them and their professors say, well, no, you can learn Linux, they might just say, no, we want to learn BSD because that's the thing we know. And that's the thing we feel attached to. And that's the community that really got me to where I am. So I want to get back to them. I don't want to get back to Linux. Linux didn't bring us here.
Nope.
BSD brought us here.
Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting, we need to figure out who our allies are in this journey type thing. And I think that's another avenue that will probably bring fruitful collaboration if we can reach them.
Yep. So the one thing that tends to surprise most of us inside the community is that, BSD has kind of led the way on so many things like firewalls or containerization or disk encryption and ZFS and boot environments, all kinds of things. How do we show people that learning BSD puts them ahead of the curve of what takes place in Linux at some later point in time?
Show them who's using it. Netflix is of course the big one.
And WhatsApp.
Oh, do you also want? Yeah, WhatsApp is another huge one. Like who doesn't want to be part of a company that pushes a billion, messages? I forget what their was a day or whatever it was. Or Netflix, where you're pushing a third of all U.S. internet traffic. I think it's just kind of showing them the big projects that we do, and I also think we need to get them involved as well. As much as I would love it to be just this great grassroots, power to the people, bottom up approach, that can be possibly more advantageous to solely a more social justice avenue, and certainly one that we should take. Those corporations can, of course, back us in the more traditional avenues of just getting people aware of like, oh, the BSDs are this thing that we do, or even like the subtle reminder that 4.3 BSD is the reference TCP/IP. I mean, just things that people already know that they're using and don't know where it came from. It's also just a really nice way of saying, hey, you actually kind of depend on this BSD thing, whether or not you know it, which is actually the focus of a guest lecture I'd done last year here. The slides are up.
Yeah, I think
somewhere.
we covered them.
I think probably off Devious, yeah. But I have just those series of slides where it's like, raise your hand if you've used SSH, if you've used the internet. I was like, I get into like if you've ever like touched a computer, sent a packet across the internet. And so by the end of like this long laundry list of stuff, every hand is in the air because you can't possibly not have your hand in the air at this point. And you're like, oh, good, everyone's raising their hand. Congratulations, you're all BSD users. You're all vitally dependent on BSD. So congratulations, this is a thing you should be aware of, that you should know of. And if you think that's cool, maybe contribute to it.
Yep.
And we're here to help you, start along that path and that journey to start contributing.
Yep. So at the Linux conferences, we've noticed that while a lot of the people know that there is, FreeBSD or OpenBSD, they know that it exists, but they don't really know much about it. They're like, oh, you have KDE? X works on BSD? What? We're like, what do you mean? So no, we have all of the things.
We have all of those things, as it turns out.
What can we do to maybe help BSDs just have more visibility to these other people and maybe eventually become the choice for some of these educational purposes?
Yeah, so this one I think is a lot more social, and kind of comes hand in hand with the more social justice work for it. We need to kind of become a social movement within the social movement that is already free software, open source software, whose ever choice of lexicon you feel allegiance to. We've kind of never been a social movement in and of ourselves. So like the traditional thing was, oh, when Linux does anything, even if they copied us, they shout it from the rooftops. Well, guess what happens when you shout it from the rooftops? People are kind of forced to listen, even if they don't want to. So that's all they kind of know. They're like, well, this Linux thing keeps yelling about all this great stuff they're doing, so I guess Linux must be the source of all this great stuff. No, it's time. BSD's been around, since the late 1970s, mid 1970s, whatever it is. It's time we start shouting what we're doing from the rooftops as loudly as we can and with as big megaphones as we can, and with the largest and most diverse group of people we can. Because that will get our voice much farther than if it's just a bunch of the stereotypical white dudes shouting from the rooftops. So not only do we need to change in our attitudes and how we choose to not make things quiet anymore about our successes, it also means that we get a richer group of people who are there with us, yelling with us. And like I've said before, that will take a real social fight and a real political fight. That is a fight I'm willing to take and I'm willing to stand for, because I ultimately think that not only will it get more people just interested in BSD, it will make BSD a model for how to do tech correctly and how to do tech properly, and how to actually do diversity, how to actually do inclusivity,
how to do community
in tech. And that's something sorely, sorely needed. Not just us, because certainly we're part of the problem, but we're not the only source of the problem. But we can do things to become the solution. And I think an honest portrayal and honest action in that will not only make people more interested in being part of BSD, but getting more people to just take real, full ownership of BSD, wherever they may fall, whether they're just users or developers or anything in between.
And yeah, I think that the other thing we can do is have more BSD people go to these Linux conferences and shout at them. Maybe not shout at them, but present. It's like, oh yeah, so you have these containers and they have all these leaky holes in them. But if you look over here, we've had containers for 15 years and they don't have holes in them and they work, and things like that.
Right, and we do it better than they do. And all that. We got to sell ourselves. One thing that no one will ever accuse me of is not being a shameless self-promoter, because I am. And it's time that we as a BSD community are also kind of just those shameless self-promoters, because you know what? That works. P.T. Barnum didn't make a circus keeping it all to himself.
So one of the new questions we like to ask people when we interview them is, what keeps you motivated to work on open source related things?
If I say because I'm getting a PhD in doing it, does that count?
It does. We like honest answers.
So I'm actually interested in the social aspects of open source. I'm kind of slightly moving away from BSD solely as my object of study, just because there's much richer analyses, and I think I can bring more back to BSD by leaving it and then coming back with what I've learned. But I think also part of it is to stay active in the BSDs as well. So I'm not only a person who uses BSD, who talks about BSD, who runs BSD conferences. Hopefully, New York City will have good news for you guys on that front soon. George, I know you're listening. But I think that research, as I bring it back and I continue to be part of the community, it kind of legitimizes both my research within the community and myself. So I'm not this person from the outside coming in and saying, I'm going to impose these rules on what is the BSD community. It's no, I have a very direct, personal, loving attachment to this thing. And I have a vision for how we can do this thing better than any of our individual dreams could ever take us. And I'm willing to stake that ground here because this is my home. And I want my home to be the best thing that it can be.
Yep. That's a good answer. Yep.
I try. I pay a lot of money to get these. No, that's not true anymore. But I used to pay a lot of money to get these degrees. So hopefully I've learned something.
So do you have anything else to add before we let you go?
Keep on keeping on.
Sure.
Does that work? No, but I think education is something that, to use the cliche, we're never done with. But it's more than just we're never done with, is that we really need to think of and find the people in our own community, change coming from within, who are kind of willing to do the teaching thing. And I think we need to figure out both who those people are, and some of them will self-select and we'll know who they are. But I think we also need to have people who are willing to just own the fact that they are an expert in BSD in some way. Maybe they're not a great kernel developer, someone who just intimately knows, the lowest of lowest level code out there. Maybe there's someone who knows a lot about ports and just knows how to write ports really well. That's an expertise you can own and you can teach. And I think it's probably a lot easier to get them confident in the teaching part than it's necessarily get them confident to the point where they know they have that kind of ownership in their expertise. So I think we need to find those people and kind of just say, hey, you are an expert in this. It's time for you to give back in this different way. And I think most people would go for it.
Yeah,
I think a little nudge can go a long way.
Well, just as you bring it up, it's like I think that all software engineering courses will need to include at least a lab, or if not a series of labs on like how to package your software and how to make it portable. And it seems like
how to write documentation for it.
That too, but even just like a guest lab on how to package your software so that it could be part of the repos on various open source operating systems seems like something that a ports expert could easily volunteer to do at some university, and the professor would be like, sure, let me have the day off. Go ahead.
Yeah. And for the BSCs, actually be nice because a lot of us who do that kind of work have a lot of experience in just really basic portability snafus that you see all the time that really is only like a 1-line, 2-line, fix. You just add an include somewhere, or you remove an include because it's already somewhere else on the BSC. It's like really little things like that. Yeah, you're right. Go a long way to getting that software into the package repos.
So yeah, there's plenty of opportunities for everybody in the community, no matter which their area of expertise is. And a lot of the ports developers don't feel like they're really BSD experts, but they have an expertise that they can use.
And they are experts. They don't. No one gets to the point of being a committer without having some sort of expertise. You just don't. So yeah, we just got to get them to own it and be excited about giving it to others. So everyone out there, you can do it. If I can do it, and I have a degree in music performance and a master's degree in anthropology, and I'm getting a doctorate in another social science, and if I can teach these kind of tech courses, then anybody can.
Yeah, I only have a diploma in network engineering. I don't even have a degree in anything.
Right. And we can do it, you know. So, I mean, the difficulty is not in getting the expertise needed to teach it. It's in the confidence and the ownership of that expertise to go out there and teach it to others. And that's easy to fix. That we
Yeah,
can do.
I didn't think I had that. When my professor who was taking a semester off called me up and was like, "Hey, I need someone to teach my course. You want to do it?" I'm like, "No. You want me to stand in front of a bunch of people and talk to them?" It's like I can't do that. I'm like shaking like a leaf. And he's like,
And look at now, you
"Yeah."
do it every
And then
week on
he's
the
like,
show.
"Well, send in your resume and they'll tell you how much it'll pay." And I'm like, "For that much, for 14 weeks, I can do it." And knowing there's an end after the 14 weeks, I'm like, okay, I'll try this. And you walk in the first day and you're like, hey, I actually know what I'm talking about, so this will be easy. And then just did it, and then every day after that was just easier. And then now, I wouldn't have imagined before going off to, a conference in Poland and trying to tell all these people who are obviously way smarter than me how to build a load balancer. And it turns out that they were all quite interested in that.
Right. Or even if you have kind of like I hate to say non-traditional, but let's go with it, non-traditional expertise. Like in Virginia a few weeks back, what did I talk about? All the stuff we learned doing Devious from a social perspective. It was, oh, the thing I learned in 5 years was if I get a lot of people to own Devious as a service, then I can have a much easier time in life being the sysadmin for this, small little shell provider. And like I said then, I cared more about my people and less about my tech, and that allowed my not tech to suffer, but things that were technical problems were defended by the community in the sense that the possibility of exploitation disappeared because you had people who owned this thing at a social level and would say, no, not in our house. Yes, we'll get the technical stuff fixed, but until that happens, we are going to enforce these rules and these ideas that make sure that everything stays okay. So even if you just do the social stuff, you can still teach BSD.
Right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Okay, we're back from the interview. Hope you guys enjoyed it with Brian Callahan talking about BSDs and education. But speaking of giving yourself an education, say you have some time this weekend. You need to spin up a FreeBSD box. Well, you don't have to go hunt for a piece of hardware to load it on or fire up a VM on your already crowded desktop. You can actually just do that in the cloud. Guess what? At DigitalOcean.com, they make that super easy. You can go set up an account up there, and with a few clicks and about 50, 60 seconds, you'll end up with a FreeBSD instance ready to go. You can SSH into it and start playing with it and actually have it up and running in any other data centers across the world, and all backed by SSDs. It'll actually be quite a nice experience. I had some fun doing that a couple weekends ago myself, and it's really quite painless. I was surprised how fast it is. So
well, SSDs make a difference.
It does. Turns out it really does.
Most people, when they have SSDs, they have one or maybe two.
Yeah.
But imagine your VMs running on like a RAID 10 of SSDs. You have
that's right.
Millions of IOPS.
It's fantastic. So, and don't forget, we still have that coupon code for you guys as well. So FreeBSD Now. Type that in after you've set up your account, and that'll unlock basically a $10 credit, which is good for about 2 months of their lower end VM. So yeah, definitely a good way to try it out and give yourself 2 months to play with it before you really have to spend any money. So again, set that up, DigitalOcean.com, and let us know if you have any experiences with that. Their tutorials and information on their sites, fantastic as well. If you need to set up something like Quassel or Mumble or whatever, they've done it all. Okay, so first up in the news roundup this week, we have digital libraries in Africa, which are making use of both Dragonfly and Hammer. And it looks like some ZFS and FreeBSD as well. But we have a link here to the Dragonfly mailing list talking about this, a posting from Michael Wilson over in the Pure Corps Trust Fund. And they're talking about using Dragonfly and FreeBSD to support the Tanzanian Digital Library Initiative in, of course, very resource-limited settings. But they cite as some of the most important reasons for using BSD as the as being basically the availability and quality of the documentation, as well as some of the robustness of the file systems. In this case, they're using ZFS and Hammer. But they also have a new website up, which you can go to see exactly how they're using this out in the field.
But yeah, I know that when we talked about previous deployment like this, they were using, I think it was ZFS mirrors, where they actually had like the 4 deep mirror,
library.
so that as disks died, the thing would be able to keep working, because you know it's probably, the library is not going to be able to get spare parts very easily. And replacement
and
parts,
often very remote, and there's probably not a tech sitting there on hand ready to fix it.
And they also had to be very robust because the power isn't. So even with UPSs and so on, it's really a matter of making sure that a voltage spike or something isn't going to cause files to be lost in the file system, or an unexpected shutdown. And something like ZFS, where it doesn't care if you suddenly unplug the power on it. It's especially since in a library type setting, most of the files are going to be read only anyway. But you don't want to have problems there. And so having a multi-deep mirror with the checksumming means that you will never lose access to your books unless you somehow manage to fry every one of the hard drives at once.
That's right. So yeah, check it out. They have their website at Tandil or TANDLI.com, it looks like. And you can see some pictures of how it's being used out in the field. It's actually pretty cool.
So interesting to see them using Hammer as well. It's good to have diversity.
That's right. So tell us about some of these speed records that looks like Netflix is trying to set out there. So what have they done now?
So this is a graph of a Netflix appliance, a single one, pushing traffic to the internet. And as it comes online and starts taking load, it eventually ramps up in this picture to about 65 gigabits per second of outbound traffic to the internet. After this snapshot was taken, they've actually continued on to about 72 or 75 gigabits per second. The two different colors there, the green is the first NIC and the red is the second NIC. Basically, it's a single socket server with a high-end Xeon E5, but so it has only one CPU chip rather than 2, like you would normally find in a high-end server. So just a single socket E5, and it has a dual-ported Chelseo T580 NIC, which is 2 40 gigabit fiber ports. They managed to push all that traffic out of a single machine, which is quite impressive, considering that I remember when it was big news when they managed to push like 20 gigabits out of a machine by bonding together 2 10 gig NICs, let alone 2 40 gig NICs. So the videos were being pushed in this particular Netflix appliance is mostly SSDs and some PCIe NVMe devices. And so some of those NVMEs are pushing, to 1.7 gigabytes per second off the flash into the OS in order to push it out to the network.
Dang.
Yeah. So the previous record before this particular machine was Netflix managed 52 gigabits out of a single machine, but only with a bunch of very experimental settings, and they were doing some crazy things. Whereas the current work, where they hit basically added more than 20 gigabits to the top speed, has much more typical settings, and they haven't had to go and do anything crazy. It's almost just out of the box FreeBSD.
Dang, wow. And he said it looks like the machine was only using about 65% of CPU and had still plenty of headroom.
He said only about 10 or 15% of the traffic was encrypted with TLS. But, that number is going to increase, but they had lots of CPU power left. Before that was their biggest concern. It's like, well, if we have to encrypt everything, there's going to be no CPU left for the network card, or the two of them are going to starve each other. But as they continue to do the work, it seems like it's going good.
That's really slick, man. Well, we'll have to just keep an eye on that, see what other kind of records they break, in the upcoming.
Well, at this point, they can't go much faster until they get faster NICs.
Right? Make us a faster NIC now.
Or putting
or do 3
4 of these 40 gig ports in a single machine. But I think cool. Going much further, they'll be limited by the performance of the SSDs and so on. Right. When they were doing this, they were like, we probably could get higher, but I think we're going to run out of users, and the peak time of the night's going to end, and there just won't be anybody else watching.
There's nobody left to serve. We've served them all so fast.
I think at this point there were about, I forget if it was like 20,000 or 60,000 streams going.
Jeez,
off the
wow.
machine.
That's pretty incredible. Okay, well, next up we have some news here that the Lumina desktop 0.8.7 has been released. So this is the desktop that's been developed on PCBSD here, and this is a very large update which has landed for it. We have a link to the website, and there's going to be some nice screenshots. So, if it's a desktop, you got to see the screenshots, of course. But among some of the notables, a brand new start menu has been added, which enables quick launch of all your favorite apps. You can pin things to the desktop, to your favorites, to your quick launch bar, etc. It's actually pretty cool. Also, desktop icons have been overhauled with this, with better font support and a new grid system, kind of a la Android, I guess, for dragging things around on the screen, which is pretty slick. And also some support for other BSDs, such as Dragonfly, has been improved, along with a ton of internal changes to both functionality and the backend. And there's really just too much to list all here at once, but of course the link's going to have all the full details along with the screenshots I mentioned. So go check that out. And I think we've already pushed that out in PCBSD as far as our Edge packages goes. So if you'd like to upgrade to that, we also have a Lumina-Develop package you can grab now too. So if you want to stay on the bleeding edge, you can now do that. Okay, what's this last one here? We have a live USB for NetBSD has been released by Jibbed, which I had not heard of this before until now, but jibbed.org. And they say basically after a 3-year absence, they've come back now. Instead of a live CD, it's a live USB image based on NetBSD. So it looks like this image contains NetBSD 7.0 as fully read-write, allows you to run the entire system from a single USB stick or drive. And it looks like they have them in both the 8 gig and 4 gig varieties, which are 64-bit and 32-bit systems. And they also have VirtualBox images as well. So if you'd like to throw it in a VM, you can do that. As far as X goes, it does include X, although it has TWM as the window manager. Although you can always use PKGN, and then you can quickly add other stuff. So they use the example, if you want to grab XFCE, boom, do that, and you've customized your desktop. Okay, we got to hit the beastie bits, and then we got feedback from you guys. But before we do that, we got to mention the last sponsor this week, which of course is going to be Tarsnap at tarsnap.com/BSD Now. Go there, get signed up, create your account if you haven't already, or log in, check and see how little you're actually spending to do your backups, which is kind of ridiculous. But come on, guys, you need to do this. You've heard us talk about this an awful lot, but just Tarsnap makes it super easy to get set up with your backups. If you already know how to use the tar command, you're already 90% of the way there. You just need to make an account on the site, grab the client for whatever operating system you're running on, or compile it yourself from source if you want to be paranoid, which is fine. And then you can trust that your backups are all being done properly, fully encrypted before they leave your box, which is the way all backups should be. I know, in today's day and age with government entities spying and corporations spying, and everyone's looking at everything now. So you don't want all your backups getting sifted through or getting subpoenaed or whatever.
Yeah.
Just encrypt it and be done with it.
An interesting one for me is the credit card processing company we use at Scale Engine uses Tarsnap for their backups. So firstly, that made me feel better about the credit card processing company. But at the same time, also made me feel better about Tarsnap.
That's right.
It's like if a big company like that trusts Tarsnap, that's good. But also, it's good to see that a big company like that realizes that they need Tarsnap and that all my customers' credit card numbers are actually safe because Tarsnap.
That's right. So again, guys, tarsnap.com/BSD Now. If you talk to them, let them know you heard it here, because come on, this is the place to hear it. Let's be honest. Okay, so we got some quick beastie bits this week. A lot of stuff to just hit real fast. So what's the first one here? It looks like WXRX support has landed in Firefox on OpenBSD. So they flipped the switch. So if you're running current, you can now run Firefox with WXRX support. And we have a link to the Undeadly site article about that. Let's see. I saw this one.
Previously, this was only available on iPhone, and now OpenBSD and iPhone are the only OSs that support it.
Nice. Well, that is really cool. And this one here is something I saw on Twitter, I think a week or two ago, but a nice little article about using the VT driver in FreeBSD to change your console resolution. So if you've been stuck at a really crummy resolution and you're on a system, maybe it's got one of those integrated Intel chips, you can actually load the i915 driver, and setting some sysctls change your console resolution so you have more screen real estate to work with, which is pretty cool. So you should definitely take a look at that.
I see they actually have it how to do it via the HDMI or other devices as well. So it could come in handy if you actually want to send your console to a projector.
Okay.
Oftentimes when you're projecting, it's slides or something. But if you actually want to do your console at a reasonable resolution to the projector, seems like this is a good thing to keep in your bookmarks.
Yeah, 1024 by 768 could actually be doable on a console. That's pretty cool. Okay, so FreeBSD Foundation had a great final overview of the Grace Hopper conference, which recently happened. We have a link to their Foundation's Blogspot site. Anything you want to mention on this one, Allan?
Groff was also there and made an appearance and helped people, but it's just a great recap of the event and the types of people that were there and what the project accomplished while there.
Cool. Okay, and then also we have a link here. It looks like a dialogue about compilers in the BSD base system.
This
here.
is from Julio Marino, who does the QA testing framework from FreeBSD and other stuff. Used to be a NetBSD developer. But he's basically talking about, do we still need a compiler as part of the base OS anymore? Or, in the case of a developer, probably, but, do users want it and so on. And so on Twitter, I pointed him to Baptiste's packaging base work where it's like the compiler will be a little package over here, maybe not even installed by default, but if you want it, just one command and it's there.
I would almost even link it into the build system, so if it's not there, it'll fetch
install
it.
As part of the make bootstrap that happens when you do make build world, it will just be like, oh, let me just grab Clang for you instead of compiling it three times.
You need these compilers. Here you go. Yeah. Done. That could be really cool.
But it's a great discussion about it, so check it out.
Okay, so next up we have a little bit of boasting here. It looks like the semi-half team showing off their new hot 96-core SMP support for FreeBSD on a Cavium Thunder X ARM V8 architecture.
So this is actually
we got a YouTube
video of FreeBSD booting on the machine.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so a couple months ago they demonstrated the 48-core one. I think that was even at BSDCan possibly. But now they have the dual socket, so that's two 48-core processors together on a single machine, which is very nice.
So I'm wondering, if you guys have any of these used ones that you just need to get rid of. I'm just saying,
those
having a lot of
production
for
boards.
PCBSD. Yeah, we've been having a lot of requests for PCBSD on ARM. So this could actually let me run a decent Poudre server and build packages and not have to do the QEMU tricks and stuff, which could be kind of nice. So I'm just saying, if you want to get in touch with me, I'll give you my address. Send it on over. We'll get that racked up and make that happen. Sorry, shameless plug there. Okay, so next up we have the New York City Bugs November meeting is going to feature a talk by Stephen R. Bourne. Oh, man, you can't miss that.
I wish I was in New York now.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, that's close to you. You could fly yet again. Right? No. But anyway, we have a link to the article here. It looks like, what date is this? November 8th?
It'd be a
19th?
special meeting.
That's right. So at the Stone Creek Bar and Lounge on East 22nd Street.
27th.
So go check that out if you're, or 27th, excuse me. Yes, check that out. Stephen Bourne is fun to hear.
They make a special note there that it's a special meeting, not on the regular date, so make sure you pay attention to that. And because if you show up at the regular date, which is before or after, and it's not Stephen Bourne, you'll be upset.
That's right. And also, we wanted to mention a new BSD, or not just BSD podcast, but it's hosted by two OpenBSD developers, Brandon Mercer and Joshua Stein.
Yes, so we
garbage.fm.
We interview Brandon Mercer on our podcast, and then a couple days later, he's like, "Wow, podcasting! I like that. I'm going to do a podcast."
Yeah, that was fun. I'll go do that now. So it looks like they have several episodes already up there. So go check it out and see if you like that. Okay, so that was Beastie Bits. So we just kind of bam, rapid fire through those. But now we have feedback and questions to get to as well. And it looks like we're going to be starting this week with Stefan. So he says, hey, I migrated my laptop to PCBSD and I love it. Thanks, Chris and company. He said, I also noticed that the App Cafe catalog is missing a powerful image media organizer and editor. So I asked the only developer I trust for such software, Pierre. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. I apologize. But he says about a FreeBSD or PCBSD port of XNView. He said, which is a well-known media organizer, editor for Windows and Linux. He said he's going to give it a try porting it over. He said, I must mention that they had a FreeBSD version back in 2008, but it was never updated. So he's hoping that my email to Pierre with his effort might change this. And he said, I sent this out hoping that other developers will hear it and follow in porting their software to FreeBSD. Yes, I agree. port more stuff over. We appreciate that. He said, in closing, I love your show and your passion for BSD. I hope to see you next year at EuroBSDCon in Belgrade. Okay, next up we have Zach. You
Yeah,
want to read
sure.
this one?
He's a Linux switcher. He says, hey guys, mostly a thank you for your show. I just installed PCBSD Current this week, mostly because I wanted ZFS. I contribute to the Fedora project, and with the recent updates to ButterFS, I thought I would convert my 3 disks to a ButterFS RAID 5. Long story short, I'm sure there's a way, but ZFS is so much more intuitive and easy to use. I've heard the community on the BSD side is so much more friendly, and so far it hasn't disappointed. I asked a question in PCBSD and got a quick, friendly answer from none other than Ken Moore. Anyway, to my question, Beehive. I'm trying to read through the docs here and there. If I want to interact with a GUI desktop environment running in a Beehive VM, do I need to set up something like VNC or RDP in the VM, or is there a better way? Currently, you would have to set something up in the VM, and that's, if you use the pre-built Windows images and so on, it'll have RDP set up, and you can just go in with that. I've seen in the super secret version of Beehive that only exists on Peter's laptop, a VNC server built into the Beehive daemon that does screen scraping, and it uses a huge amount of CPU on his laptop, but it does let you actually see what would be going to the emulated video card. So there is hope that there will be a VNC thing built in, kind of like there is in QEMU. But most times you just fire it up in the OS anyway.
Well, that's kind of what I'm waiting for, is when that built-in support lands, then we can do some neat stuff on App Cafe or in the GUI, and we can actually make a GUI where it just brings up the console and you can do the things and run Beehive kind of like a la VirtualBox. But we'll get there. We'll get there. Okay, so next up is Jake, who asks about OpenBSD VMs. He says, hey guys, thanks as always for doing the show. He said, I have a FreeBSD 10.2 machine that I use as a home server. It's a reasonably fast machine and by far the nicest in the house. I'd like to virtualize OpenBSD on it so I can use it to build and host ports. Is there a way to do this that exposes most of the computing power to the VM? It's an AMD FX 8320 and Beehive does run on it.
Well, then just give Beehive the number of cores the machine has, and you'll have all of the performance of the physical machine in the VM. The disk performance might not be great, but if you're building ports, you can do it to like a TempFS or a memdisk or something, and it'll be fine.
Give it lots of memory.
Yeah.
There you go.
I do that for video transcoding. Works great.
Okay. Let's see. Next up, we have Corey. He said, hey guys, I'm currently looking into trying BSD, and I was wondering about a cheat sheet for commands for the terminal. Is there one coming from Linux, for example? Do you know of any good ones off the top of your head?
There's been talk about creating some, even just one for package versus, apt-get, especially now that we have bapt-get. We didn't talk about that, but now when you install package, it installs as an alias bapt-get for all the people that do apt-get. That was funny. But it's actually something that our producer JT was talking about working on, since he's familiar with both sides of it now, that maybe we can beef up the cheat sheet so that it's easier to, when I was learning, it was MongoDB, having the cheat sheet, comparing it to MySQL, just so I was like, I want to accomplish this. It's like, well, you do it this way. Even though they're very, very different, just having that little conversion sheet just helps you get started and even just know where to look. If you're used to apt-get, you're not going to know to man package, right? And so on.
That's right. That seems like something they should have in the handbook.
Exactly.
Like coming from Linux, here's your cheat sheet and here's some
of
basic
course,
information
coming from
about the
which
differences.
Linux and so on. Complicates it. But yes, we can make one giant master super thing. Yes.
Because I've seen all the cheat sheets for VI. I love those. Those are quite cool.
When I was in college, I bought one of my professors the mug of VI that had a bunch of them on there, because he was always a wizard at VI.
Yeah, when I was running on Open Server at my job before this, that was what they did. It was like, here's your cheat sheet for VI. You will learn how to use this. And like within a week, I hated the first week of my job, but after that, it was fine. Like, got used to it. Okay, so lastly, we have a Rob Roy writes in and about ZFS replication. So he says, good day, ZFS Now. I know it seems like that some days, huh? But he said, I enjoy your shows more than drinking coffee in a shady graveyard filled with quacking ducks. Thank you. That sounds exciting. So hopefully you really enjoy the show. He says, I have a 3 root on ZFS FreeBSD host systems, A, B, and C. C is used to make the ZFS replication backups of A and B. He said, since A and B have several data sets that are immediate children of the root data set, it's easiest for me to replicate a recursive snapshot of the root data sets. And then he shows us his command here. He says, I start replication from host C like this, and then he shows us the commands for that, where he's piping it into ZFS receive. He said, everything's ducky immediately after the replication's finished, thanks to ZFS receive-u flag, which prevents the replicated data sets from being mounted, including those with mount points that conflict with host C's own data sets. Yet the next time host C boots, it mounts a slew of these replicated data sets, including the corresponding to the root file system, which, is bad. He said this puts host C in a mismatched state, which keeps it from booting multi-user. I've discovered that though ZFS receive-u prevents data sets from being mounted, the moment they're received, their can mount attributes are preserved from the sending host, which will cause many of the data sets to be mounted next time host C boots. Current workaround is to manually set the can mount attribute values to no auto after the replication's finished. Applying this workaround is awkward though, since there's no such thing as ZFS set-r, so he's using a long command here, a pipe, to make that happen. He said, I dislike this workaround because I have to remember to do it, and it destroys the original can mount attribute values from hosts A and B, which might make restores more tedious. Can you recommend a better way to manage this?
There's a couple things. If you just set it on the parent, then you can use inherit to force it back on the other ones, which might help. The other one, one second. I'm having to look at the man page. But so when you're doing the replication,
so we had to do this in Life Preserver when I wrote it. Like we do some magic where we don't send those properties
right.
over.
So when you're using the capital R to do the replication, that's including the properties, and what you want to do is not replicate that property or. So I use the script ZXfer to manage the replication, and I have it not copy that property or specifically set the property on the receiving side to a certain value. So like I can, even if I'm not compressing on the original one, I can turn compression on the receiving one or something like that, and the script manages it for me.
So the way we do it is we set user properties of all the properties on the host. Then we replicate over and set all those user properties. So on your receiving system, none of your properties are actually set, right? It can be set any way you want if you want to turn compression on or off on the remote side. And then when we restore via our Life Preserver or the bare metal, then we can roll back and say, oh, these are the actual properties we want. Which works. There's a lot more work you have to do to make that happen, though. That's definitely a lot of scripting.
But yeah, it would actually be nice if ZFS receive minus U could just set no auto or something.
Unset that.
But yeah, so ZXfer has an option -O to override on the receiving side a certain property, and so I can set can mount to no auto and so on. For example, in my setups, I force the read-only to true or yes on so on system C, where I'm receiving all those replications, it's all set to read-only so that it can't change out from underneath me by accident.
Oh, that makes sense.
So ZXfer hopefully will solve your problem for you.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you for sending this in. We appreciate it. That's actually the end of our feedback questions. Wow, we had a lot of stuff this last week. It has been pretty crazy, but hey, that's a good thing. So keep it coming. We want you to keep sending your stories in to feedback@bsdnow.tv. That's the only place we monitor, and don't freak out if you don't get a reply right away, because sometimes we sit on it so we can wait and answer it on the show, because that's where everyone can benefit. So again, send that to feedback@bsdnow.tv, and me and Allan or JT will see that. And we'll make sure it gets into a future episode. And it doesn't have to be just feedback or questions. If you see a story, something cool on Twitter that goes by, send it over just to make sure we've seen it. Like you mentioned the Polish articles where they did all the OpenBSD developer interviews. If somebody hadn't sent that over, we probably wouldn't have seen it, since I don't read the Polish news sites. So that was a good one. So yeah, keep it coming, and we'll look forward to talking to you same time next week.